Hello, students. Welcome to the Read Aloud for today. Today is October 29th. We will be continuing the text along the Santa Fe Trail, Marion Russell's own story. Whenever we left off, we were being told about how Marion would collect buffalo chips for her mother to create the fires. Then they talked about how the tarantulas would come out on their stilt-like legs. All right, let's continue. As we continued in a southwesterly direction, there were less and less forage for our mules and horses. We found rattlesnakes and a variety of cactus that resembled trees. Sometimes little jeweled lizards would dart across our path. Birds with long tails would walk the trail before us. The drivers called them road runners. Once we traveled for 2 whole days without water, and thirsty child though I was, I felt sorrier for the straining mules than for myself. Captain Aubrey told us how the muddy water in the buffalo wallows had often saved human lives. One dying of thirst, he said, does not stop for gnats or impurities. Mother, Will, and I had to wash our faces and hands in the same basin of water. Will washed last, for Mother said he was the dirtiest. After we had traveled for what seemed like an eternity across the hot, dry land, we awoke one morning to find the air filled with a cool, misty rain, which lasted all day. In the late afternoon, we reached a flat mesa. There were a dozen Indian lodges there, and we saw smoke issuing from the tops. We saw Indian children slither through the wet drizzle among the stunted cedar trees in the lodges. Somehow it seemed we had entered a strange land of enchantment. This was different from anything we had seen. Captain Aubrey told us we were now in New Mexico territory. This is the land, he said, where only the brave or criminal come. But it is a land that has brought healing to the hearts of many. There is something in the air of New Mexico that makes the blood red, the heart beat high, and the eyes to look upward. Folks don't come here to die. They come to live, and they get what they come for. We were a bit over 2 months reaching Fort Union in New Mexico. There, our great cavalcade rested. The tired mules were turned out to graze on the prairies. Freight was unloaded, and 200 horses turned into the corral. Army officers perched onto the fence to look over and choose their homes. The ground was a shambles of buffalo hides, Mexican blankets, and sheep pelts. Things that to be sent back east. Our camp was outside the Fort Union gate that stood open, and all day Will and I came and went as we pleased. 2 friendly Indians sat and played mumble-te-peg on a spread blanket. Will joined them and lost all of his marbles. When the mules had rested, we struck the westward trail again, starting out on a cold December morning. We were in Santa Fe before we knew it. We passed through a great wooden gateway that arched high above us. We moved along narrow alley-like streets past iron-barred windows. We saw a church with 2 cupolas. We saw old adobe walls and strings of red peppers drying. Our caravan wiggled through donkeys, goats, and chickens. We came to a plaza where a tall man with a gun told us where to go. Dogs barked at us. Big-eyed children stared at us. Shawled women smiled shyly. As darkness deepened, there was a great hunting for clean shirts and handkerchiefs. Pierre even drew the comb through his choppy mustache. From the dance hall came the tinkle of guitar and mandolin. A bale was forming. We slept in the wagon, or tried to, but the noise and confusion kept us awake. Pierre had gone to the dance, and it was hard to sleep without the sound of his snore near us. In a few days, we continued our long trek to California. One evening, as the wagon drew near to Albuquerque, New Mexico, Mother discovered that a small work basket in which she kept her money and jewels was gone. Some of the jewelry was found, but no part of the money was ever discovered. I was too young to realize what the loss of the money meant to my mother, but I do remember the shadow that settled on her bright face as we journeyed on. Now she did not have enough money to pay for the rest of our passage. When we reached Albuquerque, we had to leave the train that was to have carried us to the gold fields of California. Will and I went house hunting with her. I remember the tears that rolled down her face as she sold a great yellow brooch and a pair of earrings. She rented an old adobe house on the outskirts of Albuquerque and began taking in boarders. I remember the morning Pierre carried our luggage into the mud house. He tried to say something, but his mustache only wiggled. Mother tried to speak too, but as usual, when she was stirred deeply, she was silent, pressing her hand to her throat as if choking. Will and I stood in the bare, windswept yard watching the long wagon train pull westward. When we turned back, our surroundings seemed desolate. There was no looking back. We were soon busy cleaning and whitewashing our little abode, not knowing then how many mud palaces were to be ours in the future, or what time we would come to love them. When I grew up, I said to myself, I would travel endlessly back and forth over the Santa Fe Trail. I loved the trail and would always live on it. These were the dreams of my childhood. When Marion Russell was 9, Captain Aubrey was stabbed to death in the Santa Fe during a quarrel. A few years later, when the Civil War started, Will joined the Union Army. Marion and her mother, Elisa Mahoney, didn't see him again for 50 years. Following the war, he was ordained a Baptist minister. He became a missionary in Calcutta, India, then a minister in New Mexico City, and eventually returned to the United States. In 1917, Will was buried near Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where he, Marion, and their mother had departed with Captain Aubrey's wagon train in 1852. Marion's mother did not remarry. She went back and forth over the Santa Fe Trail many times. As Marion recounts, she was never quite happy unless she was passing back and forth over it, or planning to. She at last traveled to California and died of old age in Los Angeles. Marion traveled again and again on the Santa Fe Trail, first with her mother and brother, and then with her husband. She met Lieutenant Richard D. Russell at Fort Union when he was 19. They married the following year in 1865. After the Civil War, they settled in Trinidad, Colorado to raise their family. Marion and Richard Russell had 9 children, 16 grandchildren, 22 great-grandchildren, and 4 great-great-grandchildren. Marion died in 1936 at the age of 91 after being struck by an automobile. She was buried beside her soldier husband. How do the illustrations in the text help us as readers understand the text better? Illustrations like these help readers to better understand the text by showing what the author is describing through words. What if the author had not included the illustrations in the story? If the author had not included illustrations in the text, we as readers might not be able to picture the story with such vibrance or clarity. Think about that when you're reading and try to notice what the text is saying and what the illustrations are showing. Thank you for joining me today and have a great day.